Hello and welcome everybody to this week's DevCentral Connects. My name is Boo, one of your community evangelists on the DevCentral team. I am your host today, and we are going to have a great chat today about home labs, and specifically what I would say is the biggest home lab that I have heard of so far. I put it into the show description there, but a full 42U rack. And actually, I've seen people study for CCIE before. I used to do a lot of a lot of Cisco study before, and I've seen big network racks before. However, this is a rack that encompasses a full data center, so storage, compute, and networking. So I think this will be really cool to dive into here. Before we do that, just a couple of reminders. I wanted to let everybody know that this month is Microservices March. So I'm wearing my, you can see it here. I'm wearing my Nginx nice Golden Gate shirt today, just to signify that it's the last week of Microservices March. And what we've been doing for that is that Jason has been doing the weekly labs for Microservices March on Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. Pacific. I actually stepped in last week because Jason was out last Thursday. So I stepped in and did the one last Thursday. But this week is the last week of it. So be sure to check that out if you want to see Jason run through the lab. If you go over to nginx.com/mm, you'll be able to sign up and do the labs yourselves. It's all free, and it's all not necessarily stuff that's specific to Nginx. It's like the whole ecosystem around microservices. So you learn a lot doing it. Even the stuff that I was doing on Thursday was really interesting. Even though if you watch back, we're doing it live. Like I didn't actually get through the entire lab in that 1 hour there. I crashed and burned along the way, having some issues that I created for myself. But yeah, it is fun to see people do that kind of stuff live. So, if you get an opportunity, check out Jason doing it live, or otherwise sign up for the labs yourself. A couple other things that I'll remind everybody, the DevCentral Connects is supported by community.f5.com. This is F5's technical user community. Totally free to sign up. I would encourage you to go sign up for it, actually, because you'll see lots of interesting stuff on there, whether it is questions and answers around F5 technologies, general technology discussions on there, the DevCentral Connects folks, myself, Jason, Aubrey, Peter, we're all hanging out in the DevCentral Connects group hub on there as well. You definitely have to sign up for that one because you actually have to enter the group with your login. And then we post all the notes from the shows on there as well. So for this show today, we'll actually post some notes and how to find James and how to get in contact with him, and his website and whatnot will be posted on there as well. So be sure to check out community.f5.com. Also, a couple other things. We are streaming live right now to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So whatever platform you're watching from right now, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe. You might be listening to this via audio podcast right now as well. And if you're not, be sure to check us out on there. So that will be Apple, Google, and Spotify. Make sure you subscribe, leave a 5-star review if you can. That totally helps us out if you are able to do that. So having said all that, I'm going to bring on our guest today, Mr. James Cox. James, how you doing?
Hey, it's good to meet you. I'm doing great. It's a great middle of the week.
Yeah, fantastic. I was wondering if you wanted to go with James Corden, but you went with John Oliver for that. I was thinking the accent and whatnot.
Yes, John Oliver's got the better accent. I think the James Corden thing is too obvious. You need to mix it up a little bit and kind of come up with something a bit more fun.
Yeah, fair enough. For those
COVID,
who are listening right now, there's a virtual background for James that says last week tonight with John Oliver, but his John Oliver is crossed out and it says James Cox.
all the ways that we needed to do to survive during COVID, right? And just come up with fun backgrounds.
Absolutely. Cool. So we're going to talk about home labs today. We got connected through our mutual friend Dan Moore, actually, and he mentioned that, or we had a chat, and you mentioned you have this crazy lab. And so I want to dig into that. Labs are an important part of DevCentral. A lot of people that are part of DevCentral are doing their own testing, and they might not be part of like a large enterprise, which would host the lab for them, and they have gear just laying around, or they have cloud accounts that are, almost virtually limitless, or at least they don't see the bill for it every month. A lot of us who are, myself included, we got a little something at home so that we can do our own testing and not have to worry about other people unplugging our stuff. And it's for ours to play with. But you have, it sounds like the craziest lab that I have encountered so far. So maybe you can give us a little bit of rundown of yourself and your lab.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing engineering and development for 20 odd years now, across lots of different disciplines. I mean, I've been software engineering, software leadership, DevOps, and systems and everything else. I think most of us, I started out as a kid. One of the first jobs I had was building a computer for a neighbor. Right? They pay a little bit of pocket money, cash for some help, and back in the day, then it was fairly easy, right? You just go down to the local computer store or whatever and get the parts that kind of fit the budget, and you're good to go. And a few screws later, then you're all built in. But I realized that I hadn't done that for at least a decade when I started this whole thing out, and I thought that it was a good time to kind of get back and refresh those original roots and relearn some of those skills. Spoiler alert, it turns out that it's way harder now to build servers and find compatible hardware and make everything kind of fit into your energy budgets and all the other kind of elements that come into home labbing that simply weren't around back in the day. So this has been a journey for me to kind of re-engage with the metal, re-engage with the hardware that powers all the stuff that we do. After many years successfully working for clients and my own work on platforms like AWS, you quickly can forget just what goes into actually making these sites exist, right? And so I think it was sort of a real kind of desire to get into that and to make that work. And I add to that, I look back now and the numbers it would cost to run what I have now on AWS would make my accountant cry, my wife cry, myself cry. It just doesn't work. So at certain points, the on-prem kind of solution sort of is still the cheaper build, even if you have to go a little bit more intense like I have.
Yeah. So did it purely just start from that? Actually, I'm just going to take a little pause here and say hello to some of the folks that are chiming in the chat. We got Jose Labra. Thanks for saying hello. We got Smart Home Sellout is your handle there, so hello to you, and Omer as well, hello. And then Cisco saying this session is recorded, so you can actually, as soon as it's done, it's actually available again. So if you're watching from YouTube right now, so you can actually just watch the replay immediately with the same link. So awesome. So question for you, James, I guess. What was the first piece of equipment that you started off with, and how did you go from there?
Yeah, when I first started sort of exploring very early on, it was an external hard drive, and then it was a Drobo, because they were the kind of in vogue external storage at the time. And then it was 2 Drobos, and then that didn't kind of work out. And so then it was digging around some of the online communities. One that I'm a big fan of now is Serve the Home, and JDM, who has been thinking a lot about like how do you fit the server grade hardware into cases that make sense. So I ended up building that first Frankenstein, massive EATX box. So it's I could fit lots of drives in it because storage was the big sort of early sort of focus really, and then finding the right board and the right memory, the right CPU, and all that kind of stuff, fitting that in. And I ran with that for quite some time. And then ended up separating that to a second NAS focus box of just disks. Then I moved cross country, moved to the Midwest, where I was fortunate to actually have some space and acquired a rack as opposed to just two tower workstations. And then from there, things kind of exploded, and now I run quite a lot more variety of stuff as well, which makes it kind of much more interesting.
So is this a rack that you purchased new? Maybe we can get into like some of the acquisition logistics of it too. Are you mainly buying new stuff, or are you acquiring off of Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or buy and sell type stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. For some of the networking, say I've gone with the Unify stack. That's pretty much buying new. where when you can even buy it, it's still pretty hard to get to. But for most of the rack, and the rack itself was a Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace deal. Essentially, if you want one for yourself, it's almost always going to be dozens, if not a dozen, if not more, of them available on Marketplace or something, because they're so heavy and so big that basically people would just say, if you come and get it, it's yours. And inside of it there was a handful of pieces of hardware they just didn't bother recycling. But that's the big interesting thing about hardware, and the true secret for labbing. Most hardware that you're buying sort of an enterprise level, whether it be at Dell, be it HP, Supermicro, or others, generally get sold with a 3-year contract, a 3-year services contract. So basically, speaking about Dell specifically, generally means that you, in that 3-year period, they'll literally come to you either within 4 hours or next day and replace parts, right? So if you've got a whole bunch of stuff on-prem, you've got a guaranteed backup of all of your stuff, pretty much like next day or better. And so that's really, really helpful. It's really useful, right? And a lot of people make good use out of that. The problem is that once that 3 years expires, that hardware, which is still perfectly good hardware, is no longer under that warranty, and so now you're more at risk. And so we tend to see this sort of cyclical replacement. It's expanding. Now, people aren't doing it quite so rapidly right now, but we see a cyclical replacement. And so there are a number of e-cyclers, they call themselves, or e-services, that basically will go to the these different places. I don't know where half of them are. They'll buy pallet loads of servers, literally hundreds at a time, for pennies on the dollar. They then check them out, make sure they're all working, make sure all the parts are there, and then resell them through eBay, through other places, to people like me, or to small businesses who just want hardware at a discount. And you can configure it just as much as you could configure anything else, like literally whatever you want inside of it, and away you go. So yeah, mostly all the hardware I've gotten now has come from. I actually have a preferred provider in just outside of the Twin Cities here in Burnsville. They sell me Supermicro stuff, but also about 1.5 miles down the road, there's an e-cycler who sells Dell. So if I ever want any Dell parts for anything, I can literally be there within 5 minutes, and they have a warehouse that's literally stacked top to bottom with racks, with cards, with memory, CPU, whatever you want. And so yeah, it's been a really easy sort of ride to kind of pick up whatever pieces that you want. In fact, it's too easy, because you can start to pick up really esoteric stuff that can be really difficult to fit in, because they have special requirements. But that's what the fun is.
Oh, wow. So what does the rack look like now? Like, how much compute versus storage versus networking? And you mentioned you have a tape library as well. So
yeah, it's a great question. I think it's about a third networking, about a third compute, although that's sort of a weird stat, because I've sort of started to move towards what we call microclouds, or basically bladed chassis, where you can have multiple small chassis inside of multiple small servers inside of one machine, which is fun to talk about in a second. And then the other half is storage, half-ish is storage, including the tape, and then there's a little bit of space there for UPS and batteries. I'd say one thing, the biggest question that you're going to get in a home lab is, when everyone sees your lab, or you describe it, is just, I don't want to see your electrical bill, right? And I know that in some places, especially in Europe right now, the price of electricity is so expensive that everyone's downsizing down to Intel NUCs or very small, form factor machines, just because of the energy issues. I think we're fortunate here in the US that our energy prices have been somewhat sheltered, and so it's especially if you're on the West Coast, where you've got energy basically for free because of the big dam, or if you're in the Midwest, it's not hard to get reasonably priced energy, and solar is also really helpful for this too, right? And so it can be very cost effective, and at that point you can run whatever makes sense for you. But yeah, I've got 8U of straight up storage, spinning disks, which is pretty heavy to move around. I've had to recruit friends sometimes when I have to move that around. But yeah, my favorite newest addition was the tape library. And of course, a lot of people don't know what that means, haven't seen that in their day-to-day lives. But back in the day, when you wanted to do backups, you would write it to tape, literal tape, and so think like a cassette tape, but bigger and chunkier and more tapey. You would, they had a fairly reasonable capacity, but certainly hard disks are bigger today. But they're fairly reasonable capacity, and the great thing was that they would sit on the shelf for 30 years without degradation. And so they're great for offsite because you can throw them in a box. You can make sure they're humid, sort of moisture safe, and literally just put that wherever you want, and it's perfect. So I've been looking at how I back up my content, and I'm through various archiving and data hoarding, acquisition. I'm about 300 terabytes right now, and so to push that to even Glacier deep storage, I don't ever look at it apart from when I need to pull it out to restore it. It's still in the region of about 2,500 a year to make that work. Even B2 and Backblaze is still about that too. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense because again, that's a price that just keeps on going every year. There's no upfront, and then it reduces down. It just keeps going. So I instead looked into tape, and again, tape is interesting because there have been these different versions of tape over time. Some of the earlier ones, LTO 1 through 4 or 5, are pretty small and they're fun to play with and dinky and cheap, but not necessarily useful. LTO 6 and above is where you start getting into useful tape. If you go into like the more recent ones, LTO 8, you're looking at $10,000 for a drive, and you're looking at just loads of money because they're huge. They can back up petabyte-sized systems, but you can still get some decent deals in that sort of early LTO 6 range. So I did that. Each of my tapes are about 6.25 terabytes compressed. And a library is basically a chassis that has a number of slots for tape on each side, with basically a machine robot that goes between each different slot and moves the tapes around. And then you have up to 4 drives in the back that you can actually do the writing and the reading. And you connect to that with a direct SAS cable or a fiber cable. And yeah, that's kind of fun. So I have that connected to another 1U machine that's my backup host. And essentially it's driving the ability to write this storage to tape. It's going to take, I think, 2 rotations of tape. So there's 48 tapes in the library. I'm going to have to write to all of them, pull them out, and then write to all of them again, or a different set of them. So there's going to be 2 sets of 48 tapes to do one whole backup. But then I can have it offsite, and it's at least something. The proper labbers and DevOps people in the room will know that I'm not really following proper backup strategy, but at least that's something. But that's my big project right now.
Well, you touched on power a little bit too. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that. Typically, a lot of people, when they start off their home lab, they're just using 110 plugging into the wall. You must have, you must have routed from your breaker box down or wherever you have your lab to a 30 or 50 amp.
It's funny. I did start off with 110 as well, and it's so easy. It's so easy how quickly you trip that, and so right away, some other thing on that circuit will just turn off your lab. That didn't work out well. So I ended up pulling a 20 amp 110 volts line direct from the breaker box. I did that 2 years ago. That was the first line, that was tricky, but it was a great experience. Got some help with a proper electrician to figure out how to do it, and some of the more dangerous bits. But all in, you're just pulling. I mean, it's in the basement, it's unfinished, so it's fairly easy to pull some wire there. But essentially, it was just putting up an outlet and connecting it to the breaker, pretty much point to point. Found that even in itself was getting to be a bit tight, and I was running out of overhead there. So I a few months ago pulled a 30 amp 240 volt line in as well. So I've now got quite a bit of amperage running into it under 2 different EPS. So, and then you have to get the PDUs for support that, and because you're migrating to 240 volt across your whole stack. Yeah, it was a journey, but it was worth it. And so now it's more stable and actually runs more efficiently at 240 volts than it would under 110.
Yeah,
which is
that's
nice.
cool. We got a question from the crowd. It's actually a friend of the show, Daniel Wolf. Great to see you. It's been a while. Setting aside cost of electricity and the space consumed, what do you use for config management and patch management? This is a great question because you've got a lot of pieces there. And even expanding upon this, software wise, is it a lot of open source, or are you having to buy some of the software?
Yeah, I did give Proxmox and vSphere a look in early on in some of the first servers I had, because I wanted to see what the kind of the whole thing was about. A lot of people were recommending it. I think I lasted about 2 weeks on it. I was not happy with that platform and virtualization. It just didn't feel the right way to do things. I'm a Linux guy at heart. I've been shelled into servers since I was 15. It just feels more native to be doing that. So I got rid of all of that. Initially, I was kind of just rsyncing config files, rolling out self installs, that kind of thing. But at certain, especially with this edition of this microcloud, which actually has literally eight computers inside of it, right? 8 blades. I've had to sort of start thinking more about things like PXE boot. So I've been spending a little bit of time on initially starting up a proper PXE server, so that my machines could boot from the network without having to know anything about what it's going to run. I use Ansible. I've used that for quite some time to manage the configuration, all the machines. And so again, rolling out these new servers, I've had to beef that up a bit better and realize some of the when you're onboarding just one computer, it's easy just to do a couple of things by hand. When you're onboarding several, it starts to get a bit of a mess. So I've had to been forced into scripting first, and so I've probably doubled or tripled the size of my Ansible scripts just to be able to support all of this stuff automatically. My goal for the microcloud is that of the 8 blades, 5 of them will basically be rip and run. I can tear them down and completely start them up again with whatever I want. At any stage. And so that's going to be a big part of how this grows. But yeah, that's a big part of it. I'd love to be able to do more. Obviously, running services I'm running with through Docker. Mostly just Docker Compose and specific hosts. I want to get into Swarm and be able to move things around, but found that unless you have a truly host independent storage layer like a Ceph or something like that, you can't leverage things like on-machine NVMe drive if you also want to move around your Docker hosts, because then you're no longer on the same piece of hardware necessarily, and there's pretty chunky configuration directories that come with most of these services. So that's a little bit tricky. Also DNS, DNS for a local lab, an internal network, right? When you don't have an AD host or something like that, a formalized network topology that AD would provide you. It gets a little tricky. So you have to kind of balance things out. So I have an unbound server running with my local DNS that's hacked in, sort of configured so that if I'm requesting a specific domain from inside the network, it's going to go to local versus going remote. So there's some really interesting hacks that kind of come into that, which hopefully we can dive into another time. But yeah, there's a lot of that goes down. And sort of forms part of this whole process.
That's really neat. And we're coming up already towards the end here. So last couple of questions that I have for you, and I think we should actually do a part 2 of this because there's so much to unpack with your lab here. Obviously, for someone to justify to run a lab of this size, you're probably, you're in consulting, so you've got 20 years of experience in engineering. Are you running, really pre-production stuff, test stuff, or how much of it is actual production that you're running on there to justify all this?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny. When I started off with just a couple of hosts for compute, I found that of all the services I'm running, there are definitely some that very quickly became production. Family and friends were upset when it wasn't available. So, that limits my ability to use that host as a true home lab. So I think there really is a growth in what we might call home prod, which I haven't seen talked about much or discussed, but I think we're gonna hear about it, over the next several years. There is, just as a side on that, I think we've now kind of gotten to this world where we have services for everything and anything. We have streaming, we have services, software as a service, we have any number of different subscription-based services and tools across the web that we can use on a day-to-day basis, from email to writing documents to managing data to whatever it is that we're doing. There's been a fairly strong growth in the last 2-3 years of people on GitHub building out their own open source versions of popular software. It's not going to be as flashy, it's not going to be as robust, it's not going to be a service that everyone can immediately get access to. But when we start seeing the deployment of things like synchronous gigabit or better connections across the country, so people can actually really host services reliably, we'll start seeing the rollout of IPv6 in a way that gives you reliable IPs that you can use, and so on. And when you start going down that path, I think we're going to see a lot of people who are going to host a whole suite of tools and services on their own, everything from Pies, to Nooks to what I have, support their own, family and friends, whatever infrastructure they need to use, because we're getting this death of 1,000 subscriptions, and no one wants to keep just paying, here and there, everywhere. I think we'll start seeing that stuff condensed down with our own hosted stuff, as it's becoming so much more user-friendly, so much more engaging, and simple to get into. So I think we're going to see more of that. And so, yeah, HomePod is growing, and we'll see that happen. For me, like I said, I had 1 or 2 servers initially, spread out my load, and then HomePod across all of that. So I had to get more. And now I'm definitely getting a distinction there. One of the things that's on my mind for 23 is working through the concept of, because it's home lab, the networking is also running my home network, lights, Wi-Fi, everything. At some point, I need to start, understanding that needs to separate, right? And do I end up having, separate router, separate switches, separate, services, and a different. Already, I have different VLANs and software separation. But do I start going into hardware separation for that as well, right? And one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you is things like the F5 accelerator. Those things that can sit in front of all of this and provide that kind of gateway to the outside are interesting, because maybe they are the sort of solution, or even through Nginx as well, right? Those are both the solution to helping bridge that gap and bringing people inside in a safe way. So I think that's something that I'm really interested in, and finding out like how to do that effectively, so that I can start to expose some of these services in a meaningful way publicly without having to put myself at risk.
Yeah, especially, I mean, you mentioned the Unify stuff, so I would imagine you're using some of the Unify security, home security type stuff as well. I see a number of folks with they have amazing cameras and NVR systems and stuff like that. So it becomes really important to keep that kind of stuff up, because you never know when something like that's going to be needed. The footage might be needed for something, and if anything's down along the way, heaven forbid, that was a really important thing that needed to be rebooted at a certain time or something like that.
Right.
So as we kind of close out here for our time, James, wanted to just get an idea from you, like what kind of project you're in engineering consulting, what kind of projects do you take on these days, and what's been filling your time?
Yeah, you mentioned how I was using it for work, and we kind of glossed past that. But it's a good example. I ended up working with a company who had a really huge database in the billions of rows, and we needed to sort of restructure it so it was a little bit more balanced, let's say. And so it was nice to have this hardware where I could take a clone of that 300 gig file, and throw that into memory on one of my machines, and then play with different scenarios of how to move data around. So that was really fun. What I end up doing a lot of my time is working with legacy systems, working with thorny problems that need someone who's got experience to kind of help guide through and figure out how to unpick and get people back to normal, right? So sometimes tech debt gets a bit too far, or scale happens that you haven't quite considered, and you've got to find that way through it. So I spend time helping companies do that, especially startups, but also big companies too, and solve those kinds of scary looking problems that are actually quite fun once you get into it and really understand the problem set.
That's awesome. So you've got a website, smokeclouds.com. People can find out more about you on there. You're a hired gun.
My branding. Hired gun. Also looking for good, really great teams to join. But it's really fun to be able to go and help different teams solve their kind of intractable problems, and help them get to that next level, which is something I spend a lot of time doing.
Yeah, fantastic. Very cool. So we'll have all of that information again on community.f5.com. Go register there. We'll have a DevCentral Connects group on there, and there will be a show thread that's already created. And we'll have all of James's info on there. We'll put it into the show description, that kind of stuff as well. So thank you very much, James, for joining me today. We're definitely going to need to park a part 2 down the road and get into a little bit more of the use cases that you have there and how people can get more value, potentially out of their small little home labs that might just be a NUC or two.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. It's great fun to sort of get into the stuff, and I'd love to know more if people are getting into it themselves. Because on DevCentral, yeah, I think it's a future for smart engineering.
Yeah, totally. Alrighty. Thanks a lot, James. I'll bring you down, and I'll be chatting with the folks for a little bit here.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Amazing to have James on. That is such a cool lab to have. Like, I look at my Intel NUC and I'm like, this little thing, I don't know if it's a drop in the bucket compared. It's not really a drop in the bucket compared to what James has. So really cool to hear what he's doing with that lab as well and how it's built out over time. And cool to hear about his experience too. Like, he's one of those unicorns who has like experience from traditional systems, and then he has all this experience with the modern and microservices and cloud systems as well. So definitely a person that can bridge the two, help out with people's technical debt and whatnot. So be sure to check him out on smokeclouds.com and his LinkedIn and his Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, just a couple of things I wanted to remind folks. It is Microservices March. So wearing my Nginx shirt right now. Make sure you go check out nginx.com/mm. Check out Jason's live streams on Thursdays at 8 a.m. This is the last one, the last week of it, actually. So he'll be doing Microservices March week 4 this Thursday. And be sure to like and subscribe, whether you're watching from YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter right now. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google, make sure you're following us on there as well. Otherwise, we will close her out for now. And I'll also remind everybody, be sure to go register on community.f5.com so you can get all the info in the show thread for how to get in contact with James. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining me today, and we will see you all next week. Well, thanks for checking out that video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You might want to check out one of these videos over here. And if you haven't already, go check out community.f5.com. This is where all the DevCentral Connects hosts hang out, as well as the rest of the community. It's free to sign up, and we'll see you there.